The author Donald Charles Davis, writing as The Aging Rebel, blogs about motorcycle outlaws for an audience of bikers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, journalists, and policemen.
I'm a guy with a motorcycle and a keyboard who likes to tell stories and who thinks that there are many good stories on the motorcycle outlaw frontier.
And those stories are the truth.
Yeah, I take great pains to try and tell the truth, yes. Christie and the Hells Angels symbolize a set of American ideals that are under siege. People are very interested in the Hells Angels, at least partly because they represent a lot of ideals that people aren't supposed to espouse anymore. They're tough guys. They do what they want. They're very free. Most bikers see themselves as civil libertarians. And in the case of Christie, that's a dangerous idea for somebody to espouse. He's very well known, and he's been very well known for a long time, since at least 1980.
What makes him well known?
He was willing to be a public spokesman for the Hells Angels. One of the things that I think makes Christie appear to be a danger to certain people is that he says bright, reasonable things, and he at least appears to be a bright, reasonable man. And it is often important to police, it's increasingly important to police to demonize bikers. He certainly is not provably guilty of what he committed. But that doesn't matter. They'll find a way to make him look guilty. I think he's probably in greater jeopardy now than he's ever been facing any other charge in his life. Because these are federal charges they carry very severe penalties.
So do you think you're being pursued for the crimes they've alleged you've committed, or for the lifestyle that you've led?
I think that they think they're punishing me for both. I think that they feel that I've probably gotten away with a lot of things over the years, and now they just aren't content with me riding off into the sunset.
The general public doesn't seem to understand what these people are about, what they believe in. I think to the average person who doesn't know anyone who's involved in the motorcycle culture, it can be very intimidating. It can be scary to a point, and law enforcement uses that fear to get funding. I think it's easier for them to go after a group that is so well known and so visible to the general public.
Police are very romanticized and made out to be heroic, and they've begun to see themselves as mythic heroes. And mythic heroes always need mythic villains. And so, to the extent that Christie is a villain, he's a mythic villain. The reason why Hells Angels in particular are targets of federal law enforcement is because we live in an increasingly controlling society. America is closer to being a police state now than it's ever been. And George Christie represents freedom.
The road that he chose to follow was a hard road. I think it was hard to stand up for the things that he believed in and the things that he refused to compromise on. Law enforcement decides to go after the motorcycle clubs because they're an easy target to go after.
If they're wrong and you are released at the end of the day, do you get any of this time back?
Well, something similar happened to me in 1986, 87. I spent almost a year in Terminal Island Federal Prison. Spent a year down there fighting a case. It was a murder that never happened, and a crime I never committed. And ultimately, I got found not guilty, and the jury decided that the FBI had framed me, and I didn't get anything back. I got my freedom back, and that was enough at that particular point in time.
Back then, though, they held him in custody the entire time the case proceeded, and I was at home with my mom, with my brother. It was the three of us taking care of one another while he was waiting for this trial. Fortunately, the jury saw what was really going on. He was found not guilty. I mean, I remember sitting in class and getting a note that said, not guilty.
How do you feel about that?
It was really hard. I'm thankful, though. I'm thankful that people sat and listened to what was really going on. And they made sure that the right decision was made.
My name is Al Cavazos. I'm a member of the Mongols Motorcycle Club. My brother is Ruben Da Cavazos, former national press of the Mongols. When they came to my house, they had a news crew with them. So they came to my house at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning with a full news crew. If we were so dangerous, there was reporters around us when we got arrested. It was the ATF. They said that I was involved with drugs in New Jersey with another club called the Pagans. Well, it was all fabricated. Either I plead guilty, I got 8 months, or I fight it and I get 20 years. I was innocent, but the reason you can't win, because the ATF lies.
My name is Jeffrey Lustig. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Bellingham, Washington. I'm the lawyer for George Weggers. He's the ex-president of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. We were involved in a case in 2005 and 2006 in which the U.S. Attorney brought a 36-count indictment against my client and other members of the Bandidos. The charges in the case involved allegations of Rico, which is the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act from the 1970s. The U.S. Attorney had alleged that the Bandidos were a criminal enterprise and that my client, George Weggers, was the head of that criminal enterprise. So he was raided by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives agents in the FBI. He was put in jail and put on trial for several allegations of violating the Rico laws.
My name's George Weggers. I'm the ex-president of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. I was arrested. I pleaded guilty to one charge out of, I believe, 27. The way the government went about it was completely absurd. They charged us with racketeering, assaults, conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering, kidnapping. I didn't have anything to do with it.
George Weggers got one of the most unusual, probably the most unusual Rico plea that anyone has ever seen. He agreed to plead to one count, which alleged a conspiracy to commit witness tampering. And the witness tampering was never proven. They could never prove that he actually tampered with any witnesses. But the plea agreement was remarkable because not only did he get basically what amounted to time served, he got 20 months, he was allowed to be released from pretrial confinement after about a month and a half after his plea. But he was allowed to still be a member of the Bandidos. He was allowed to still be the president of the Bandidos. He was allowed to associate with known felons. He was also allowed to travel to Bandido events, both in the United States and worldwide. The other thing that's interesting is that most Rico convictions have very large forfeitures. This plea agreement included 0 forfeitures whatsoever.
About 2 months ago, I went to court in Judge Carter's courtroom. I wanted my property back. So I told the judge I want to go to trial. The ATF would not take me to trial. They gave me back my motorcycle, my property, If I'm charged with racketeering and drugs, why would you give me back my property?
George Christie was known as kind of a peacemaker in the Hells Angels, and he was known as somewhat of an innovator. Well, George Weggers is too.
You wear your patch on your back, and you have a reputation that they push. They push, like they say, okay, these clubs are at war forever. You know, they've been killing each other here for a long time, or something like that. Maybe it was a skirmish that ended years ago. Maybe it was one or two people. You know, maybe nobody. They're always instigating on things. They called me up one night and told me that the Hells Angels had a hit out on me. So when I hung up the phone from the cop, I called George and said, George, do we have a problem? And he said, no. He said, maybe, you know, some people yelling at each other in Missouri or something, but he says, I can't see any problems, you know. I said, well, I got this phone call about, you know, and he laughed and he said, yeah, they told me the same thing about the Outlaws. They try to get things going. It supports them. It builds up their funds. Here in a little place like Whatcom County, they don't get big funds, you know, but now, because they've got organized crime here, which they brought in themselves, you know, and said it was organized crime, they get, you know, they get more government money, they get lots more things. Maybe they get maybe they get a few more police cars, maybe they get a few more officers or something. It's all about manpower and spending money.
I think there was a sense after 9/11, especially here along the border in Washington state, that federal government could flex its muscle, could move in and take charge of certain things that maybe they had wanted to take charge of over the years but couldn't. I think because the motorcycle clubs were gaining in popularity and gaining in membership, that they felt that this would be a good time to do it.
For me, it was worth it. It was worth it because I spent a whole lifetime doing it. And in the end, you know, after I was arrested, sitting in jail, and while I was in jail, I was still a bandito. You know, I wasn't anything else. And I was proud of that. I told the judge I was proud of that. My whole life was an adventure. And I love adventures. But you have to remember, adventures are only good after they're over.
When you're riding a motorcycle, you are out there pushing yourself through the elements. All the elements are surrounding you and they're around you, and you're pushing right through them. And you know, it's, to me, it's really a true form of Zen. You can't think about riding a motorcycle. You just have to ride the motorcycle and become one with it. It's the old saying, you know, if I have to explain it, you won't understand it. And that really, there's a lot of truth to that. I can't explain riding across this country like for the first few times. Even now, if I were to get on my bike now and take off, it's been a couple of years, it would be a tremendous, exhilarating experience. Freedom, you know, we profess to be free in this country, and if you really want to experience the freedom of this country, you can't do it any better than on a motorcycle. Going through the Bighorn Mountains on a motorcycle, it's like a religious experience. If you didn't believe in God or a higher power before you left to go through that pass, if you don't, by the time you get through it, you're missing something. I mean, I understand when the Indians say the things that they do about Mother Nature and Mother Earth, and it all makes sense to you. You get out there in the Dakota area, and it is a spiritual land. You can't deny it. It really is. I want to tell you about the first experience and impression I had with an outlaw motorcyclist. And, I was probably between 7 and 10 years old. This guy rode up, and it caught not only my attention, it caught everybody's attention. I watched this guy. He never paid attention to anybody else around him. He was focused on his bike. It was evident to me how much he was impacting everyone around him. Everyone around him was being impacted but him. He was just doing his own thing. And I just thought to myself, that's a lot of power to wield without even trying. All he was doing was expressing himself by riding his motorcycle. He wasn't bothering anybody, but everybody around him was sure bothered.
So was it the power that attracted you?
I think so. I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't the power. It was the power, and I think just the mere, and he looked pretty damn cool.
How did you approach joining a club?
Well, I started, my bikes kept changing and getting more custom and personalized, which, back in the 60s and early 70s, you couldn't go in and buy a custom Harley Davidson. You had to build a custom Harley Davidson. And the different areas that people lived in defined how their bikes looked. Like, you could actually look at a motorcycle and you could tell, well, this guy's from San Fernando Valley, this guy's from the Ventura area, this guy's from the Bay Area, just by the type of motorcycle they had. And when you started exchanging ideas and starting to get to know these individuals and relying on them, camaraderie builds. And I gravitated towards bike brotherhood. And ultimately, I made a decision that I wanted to become part of one of the bike clubs. Process is a long, drawn-out process, and, they're looking at you, and you, if you have any sense at all, should be looking at them just as hard as they're looking at you to make sure that this is a lifestyle you want to pursue because it takes 100% commitment. It's not something that, you do on the weekends or when you feel like putting on your motorcycle, garb and go out there and have some fun. I mean, it's 100% commitment, 365 days a year commitment.
It is a grand dream to be an outlaw. To be an outlaw is to search for one's moment, as Beowulf searched. To be an outlaw is to be, all at once, Robin Hood, Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Boone, Wyatt Earp, Jesse James, and Clyde Barrow. But outlaws live by their own code. It is an accomplishment to be an outlaw. Criminals drive Mercedes or ride in limousines. Outlaws ride the last American motorcycles.
It makes you feel part of something much larger than yourself. I know the first night I became a member, it was kind of interesting. The next day we rode out to San Bernardino and we went to Betty, who made at the time all of the patches. I know she doesn't do it anymore. She's probably not even alive anymore. But we went out there and sat in her little sitting area while she sewed my patch on my jacket. And that was quite an experience because you hear people talk about different, types of patches and insignias and emblems and whatnot. And having a Betty patch was kind of a special deal in our club for a long time. And having it sewn on by Betty even was, the icing on the cake, if you can understand that whole concept of it was a big deal. She was a very religious woman. She didn't want us cussing in the lobby. We had to go outside. If I didn't smoke, but the smokers had to go outside and smoke. And she told us not to make a lot of noise when we left with the motorcycles. She was a pretty good old gal. I know riding back with my jacket on, with my patch on that Betty personally not only made but sewed on my jacket, it was a big deal. It was a spiritual awakening, if you will. We were out in the middle of the desert, and it was very dark. And anybody who's been out in the middle of the desert in the middle of the night without a full moon knows how dark it can get out there. And the guys seemed to be getting very apprehensive. And somebody said, "What road are we on?" And I was trying to calm everybody down, and I just casually looked at him and I said, "All roads lead to where I'm going." I go, "Just follow me." And we took off, and ultimately we got to where we were going. It took a little while, but we made it. So that's where that term came in. All roads lead to where I'm going. And whatever road I'm on now, that's where I'm going.